What better way to start a video pitting movie Sonic against game Sonic than by talking really quickly about the Super Mario Bros. Movie. It's been a while since I last talked about the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and we've had a few trailers since then, a few bits of promotional material, and I have to say, all my skepticism aside, I'm very impressed by everything I'm seeing here. At the very worst, it looks like it's going to be a love letter to Mario's history and world. At best, maybe it's actually a really good movie too. And my whole reasoning for my skepticism has been that generally Illumination Entertainment, the studio collaborating with Nintendo on this movie, have rarely aimed higher than a 6 out of 10. Which is funny because considering how many films they've got under their belt and their strong first impression with the first Despicable Me movie, it all kind of reeks of complacency, but ultimately I can't complain too much because the target demographic of these movies seem to love them. Still, I can't help but smirk a little bit when I see the Illumination Entertainment goes to see the Super Mario movie trailer, where they've got all of the Illumination Entertainment characters all flocking to the cinema, and it's like, wow, geez, look at all of this aggressive mediocrity. But at the end of the day, I am fully open to the fact that I might be surprised, and of course I do have a vested interest in this movie anyway because it's Mario, and while I don't have quite the same connection with Mario that I do with Sonic, I am still looking forward to it for that reason. What I do find fascinating though is how the narrative towards the Sonic movies has definitely shifted. And it's funny because before the Mario movie trailer first dropped, there was this kind of consensus as far as Sonic goes, that the movies were doing better than the games, that the games needed to take some more cues from the movies. Yet ever since the trailers and posters for the Mario movie, suddenly that narrative has shifted to the Sonic movies should be more like the games now, that people would rather have had something that actually took place in the games universe, and used the legacy Sonic rather than using a brand new depiction of the character. Now, I don't think the Mario movie's publicity is the only moving part in this situation. At the time of both of the Sonic movies' release, the last major Sonic game was Sonic Forces, and I think the Sonic fans were very much at a point of anything is better than this. Yet now we've had Sonic Frontiers, a much more favorably received game. I think people are seeing much more of the merits to the game Sonic now as well. That paired up with the inherent fickleness that comes with fandom. So today I wanted to make a video pitting the two versions of Sonic against one another. Game Sonic versus movie Sonic, to determine whether or not we maybe would have been better off with Sonic movies based in the universe of the video games. Now, I do want to state ahead of time that this is by no means a universal metric. Everything on here comes from a very subjective opinion. What I think is a shortcoming might be a strength to somebody else. But this is food for thought. This is a launch pad for discussion. So it's like, let's say you're like a Sonic tuber or just someone that covers Sonic content occasionally, and you've maybe wanted to make a movie Sonic versus game Sonic video, but I've already done it. Well, don't let that stop you from doing it, because I think what you're going to have to say is going to be very different from what I'm going to have to say. This video is by no means like an ultimate deciding factor in which version of Sonic should be used carried forward, or whether or not one version of Sonic is by any means objectively superior. It is, like Sonic himself, just a bit of entertainment. Nothing too deep here.
Mamma mia, you made it this far into the video and you still haven't subscribed? What in the name of spaghetti and meatballs is this all about?
Hey, f*** you, boy, why you not subscribe to the channel, pup, yeah? And click at the link in the Patreon in the description below, or I'll f***ing kill you, boy. Don't f***ing test me.
That's one spicy meatball.
Yes, it is.
So this first category is immediately going to put one of these particular Sonics at a disadvantage, but I do think it is an important hurdle to overcome, or at least acknowledge. So the first category here will be consistency. Now, both versions of these characters take place over the space of one singular continuity. Game Sonic being the legacy version of this character, and naturally he has had the longest run of the two, so it stands to reason that he has had the most changes. Movie Sonic, on the other hand, has existed for only 2 movies and 2 shorts. And while he has grown and developed over the course of his adventures, the character has a much more linear progression than his video game counterpart. Game Sonic, yeah, he definitely grew grows over the course of the games. He's the chatterbox dude with tood in the 1990s, who was pretty faithfully adapted to a newer, slicker style in the early 2000s, but he gradually matured over time, moving to the storybook games and Sonic Unleashed, where he was a much more mature depiction of the character. He was a little less high energy, a little less cocky, and a lot more noble. However, in the 2010s, Sonic would then revert to his more 1990s style of personality, being portrayed as more cocky and endlessly confident. Going back to kind of trying to emulate that sort of rad dude with tood style, even if by today's standards it came across as more dorky than anything else. Before, once again, being reverted back to his more matured version in 2022's Sonic Frontiers, which would more closely mirror his characterization in the IDW comics penned by the same writer, Ian Flynn. There are obvious reasons as to why Game Sonic has seen so many changes over the years, being the changing of the guard in the writing department, as well as Sonic continually trying to keep up with the demands of the time. During the early 2010s, nostalgia played a big part in pop culture, particularly gaming. So it did make sense that Sonic would naturally embrace more of his nostalgic 90s attitude. With this, Game Sonic has definitely proven to be generally more adaptive towards the sensibilities of the time and the demands for the character, as he's more of a corporate entity rather than an outright character who grows and changes in a cohesive fashion. Sega are the owners of the Sonic IP, so naturally, while they are trying to look after this character, they are trying to look after this brand as well. So naturally, Sonic the character will do what Sonic the brand needs him to do. Now, movie Sonic has only existed for a very short space of time, so times haven't really changed much with him. However, this doesn't mean that he isn't reflective of the times and trends that he exists within. Out of the gate, movie Sonic has always kind of prided himself on paying homage to the 1990s, with the films taking on a very deliberately corny tone, reminiscent of a 1990s family film, and as such, both Sonic 1 and 2 feel like they could be lost franchise films from the 1990s, albeit with the special effects standards of today. That's not to say that they don't embrace modern trends as well, such as the floss dance popularized by Fortnite becoming something of a tradition in these films, and the inclusion of pop music, with much of it being from like the 1990s. You got a lot of like the Run DMC in there. But lest we forget the Uptown Funk dance in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, movie Sonic absolutely has the benefit of being able to reflect on the successes of the game Sonic, being an iteration that came after the fact, and I think that absolutely shows with a more consistent take on the character. With all that being said, there is merit to be found in various unique depictions of the same character. The problem is that Game Sonic still wants to adhere to a certain continuity with a very specific style. Game Sonic's inconsistencies could be more easily forgiven were it to pride itself on different styles per story. Unfortunately, it rarely does that. So while I acknowledge that there is an unfair advantage here, it's safe to say that movie Sonic did learn the right lessons from the game Sonic, where game Sonic doesn't always learn the right lessons from himself. So the point goes to movie Sonic. The next category we're going to talk about is design. Now, Game Sonic has seen some tweaks to his appearance from game to game, eventually landing on his most current iteration, which has stuck since the late 2000s. The closest that Game Sonic has ever really come to any kind of redesign took place in the late 90s, with the shift from classic Sonic inspired by rubber hose cartoon sensibilities to the more graffiti-inspired modern Sonic, who has gradually toned down his appearance to more of kind of a middle ground between the two. No, I won't be including Boom Sonic here because Boom Sonic is Boom Sonic. He's not the main game Sonic. He's not the legacy version. Sonic has one of the most recognizable designs in video gaming history, and his appearance has been integral to the survival of the Sonic brand through thick and thin. Everybody knows what Sonic looks like. This was the video game mascot that made Mario scared back in the 90s, and you can immediately see why just looking at him. With that being said, as much as I like Game Sonic's current aesthetic, it is interesting how the art style of the environments and the style of the story changes from game to game, yet Sonic's design is pretty homogenized at this stage. I don't think Sonic looks outright out of place in the more realistic looking worlds of, say, Sonic Frontiers. And definitely not to the extent that the modern, more anime-inspired Sonic looks out of place in the very plasticky world of Sonic Lost World. But I do think there is a case to be made that some art style changes would be absolutely welcome to the game Sonic if they continue to go for drastically different tones and characterization. With that said, improvements have definitely been made to Game Sonic's appearance, with his quills being more proportionate and somewhat balanced now, the nice flocked furry texture. We could still afford to shrink the hands and head for better movement and expression though. As you can tell that the animators are having an incredibly difficult time animating this guy with his proportions the way they are. Now, it's no secret that Movie Sonic has had two designs, with him originally intended to make his big screen debut with a major departure from any of the Sonic designs that we know and love. What the studio were not anticipating was that the backlash to this redesign would come not just from Sonic's longtime fans, but in the form of intense ridicule from the general public. As I mentioned before, Sonic is one of the most immediately recognizable video game characters, and his design has been integral to the success of the brand through good times and bad. So, naturally, when you stray too far from that, people take notice, and you lose one of the most important components of this character. Yes, this design here was a complete and absolute failure, but fortunately it never made it to any kind of official release in this franchise, beyond a small role as his own offshoot character in the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie, but that's a separate character entirely at this point. There are no noticeable changes, so to speak, between films for Movie Sonic's finalized official design, beyond some tweaks to his colors in the Drone Home short, and him being scaled up a little bit in the second film, to avoid Tails being the size of a stuffed bear. So once again, we've got a much more consistent thing going on here, aesthetically speaking. The final design for Movie Sonic is not a far cry from Game Sonic by any stretch. Movie Sonic is a little more emotionally expressive, with larger pupils and more accentuated eyebrows. His proportions allow for a little more range of movement than his game counterpart too, with smaller hands, feet, and head. The main appeal to this design is that he's been made to better fit within the realistic surroundings of these otherwise live-action movies, despite hailing from another world with its own set of logic. This is a far more textured and defined Sonic, with clear fur textures, quills sprouting out of his trademark head spikies, and his nose has the texture of a little doggy nose complete with nostrils. And perhaps the biggest departure is the separation of Sonic's iconic mono eye. I might be wrong here, but I think these movies mark the first time that Sonic has been portrayed with two individual eyes, which have been carefully designed so that they'll still resemble the overall eye shape that Sonic is known for, especially with the tan fur from his muzzle rising up the bridge of his nose between his eyes, giving off the illusion of the mono eye if viewed at a distance. Movie Sonic is such an intricate redesign that by no means loses the cartoony sensibilities of the game Sonic, but applies a level of texture and tangibility to the design that it looks less out of place in a realistic setting. Honestly, this Sonic design would fit beautifully in a game like Sonic Frontiers with its more tangible looking environments. When I think of a modernized Sonic the Hedgehog, this design is perhaps the first thing that springs to mind, but I would never dismiss the merits of the design that inspired it. Things like textures are really just apples to oranges, but the reason I'll be handing the point to Movie Sonic here is for his proportions and versatility. His proportions allow for better movement with more expressive animation, but also this guy would look good in environments both cartoony and realistic, as long as there is a tangible sensibility to it, as we've seen when we've seen him in the Green Hill Zone when juxtaposed with our own world Earth. Movie Sonic is just the most versatile that Sonic has ever looked. And the fact they could get it this right after getting it that wrong is insane to me still today. The next category is the origins and lore of the character. Now, Game Sonic doesn't really have an origin story. There were pieces of external media at the time, but none of which were ever really canon to the games, or even evident for that matter within the games. Be it that Sonic was the reincarnation of a fighter pilot, or a hedgehog that lived near a fast food restaurant that got turned blue in an accident, or if Sonic was just a regular dude with his Nicky the Hedgehog alter ego. Absolutely none of this made it to the games though, which is kind of a shame given that I actually kind of like the Nicky the Hedgehog idea with Sonic being his superhero alter ego, but hey. Game Sonic is just Sonic. He hails from South Island, which is one of the few islands that are home to a variety of anthropomorphic animal people, while the more developed territories belong to the humans, who will occasionally interact with their anthro-animal friends. There's a lot that kind of contradicts this in canon, but it's the resolution they've landed on after being pretty undecided on how Sonic's world even works up until 2022. Movie Sonic out of the gate revealed Sonic's origin, an orphan hedgehog born with supersonic powers, raised by Longclaw of the Owl tribe, at war with the Echidnas for the source of ultimate power, the Master Emerald. He spent a small part of his childhood years with Longclaw on the planet Mobius. The planet's name was confirmed by the novelization of the second film, before being sent to Earth for his own safety, where he hid from the humans for years until teaming up with Tom Wachowski to escape the psychotic government agent Dr. Robotnik. And the rest is history. It kinda goes without saying that Movie Sonic has a lot more of a backstory to him than his video game counterpart, which took nearly 30 years to finally decide what planet he even hails from. The answer is Earth. Point goes to Movie Sonic. This next category is arguably the most important one of the bunch. So, personality. Christ, where do I even begin with Game Sonic? As mentioned, he kind of dips in and out of maturity. He started out as a cocky dude with tude, gradually matured over time, became insufferable and juvenile, before reverting back to being matured. I think the common contingent with Game Sonic is that he's confident, cocky, and he'll act before he thinks. He's often referred to as short-tempered, but honestly, I think they use that term pretty liberally, as you'll rarely see this guy lose his composure. He's impatient, I guess, in that he wants to keep on moving and hates to waste time. But it's really rare that you'll see anything or anyone get under his skin. It's safe to say that the game Sonic has improved a lot with the recent IDW comics and Sonic Frontiers laying out that Sonic values freedom above all else. While yes, he's obviously quick on his feet, he's also quick to forgive and make peace with his enemies, with his trusting side proving to be something of a character flaw. He lives by his own values and code and puts the safety of others above all else, even risking his own destruction to protect his friends. This all comes naturally to Sonic, as there was never a time when Sonic wouldn't do whatever it takes to save the world. Whether he does that with wisecracks and a smirk, or just tries to get the job done as quickly as possible. Yeah, that could be entirely dependent on the scenario or writer, but Sonic's values generally remain the same. Everyone should have the freedom to pursue their own adventures, even his enemies. But the second that person puts someone else in danger, he will do what he can to put a stop to it. Sonic is more a believer in cure over prevention, which speaks to just how confident he is in his ability to set things right. Movie Sonic, on the other hand, he's very similar, but in the more superficial aspects. Movie Sonic comes off as cocky, confident, and always ready with the quip or a wisecrack. Generally, he's more faithful to Sonic's earlier depictions, as the guy's a total motor mouth. There's much more emphasis on this Sonic being a kid who is gradually learning about the responsibility that comes with being the hero that he wants to be. Sonic's impatience and high-energy nature have been reworked to be more that he's easily distracted and a little oblivious to the severity of certain situations. There's a lot with Movie Sonic's characterization which could easily be attributed to representing a kid with ADHD. Which I won't lie, I really appreciate, as I myself have ADHD and I can kind of relate to Movie Sonic in that way. To that same end, Movie Sonic is a bit more emotionally reactive than his video game counterpart, more conscientious. When his impatience causes him to make mistakes, he reflects on them and drops his cocky facade in order to take responsibility and make things right. Movie Sonic can be a little more petty, a little more ignorant, and genuinely temperamental at times. Unlike his game counterpart, this is a Sonic that actually fears Dr. Robotnik, as opposed to being excited to thwart his latest scheme. It is of course worth noting that Game Sonic can be prone to screwing things up too, due to how quick to action he can be. Game Sonic was responsible for the Zeti taking control of Eggman's mechs, the End being broke out of cyberspace, and the shattering of the multiverse in Sonic Prime, because apparently Prime Sonic is the same as Game Sonic. The key difference here is that Game Sonic is so confident in his ability to fix everything that he rarely reflects on his mistakes in any kind of emotional way. He knows that he can set things right one way or another, he always does, so he just keeps moving. The way I see it, Game Sonic is the hero that movie Sonic aspires to be. How he'd view his ideal self internally, the Sonic that he strives for. The fact that with movie Sonic, we've got a version of that character that can falter, that can fail, and actually cares about his failures, reflects on himself and how he can grow. This makes him a much more interesting and relatable character. Game Sonic is so confident in his ability to save the day that he kinda doesn't need anyone to root for him. He fears nothing. Movie Sonic, on the other hand, is someone I'm inclined to root for because he doesn't always believe in himself. A hero that strives to be perfect is more interesting to me than a hero that is perfect, which is why Movie Sonic does get the point here too. Going a little more for like the metaphysical now, we're going to talk about powers. As of course, action is a big part of Sonic and it will naturally be a big part of any Sonic movie, so therefore it makes sense for the powers to hold some stake. Game Sonic is propelled by a wind-like force that allows him to move at supersonic speeds. He's also a skilled combatant, able to throw in some punches and kicks. He's even able to perform chaos control using a bogus Chaos Emerald. Movie Sonic's powers are more visually defined than Game Sonic's, as he shares an innate glowing ability with Knuckles. His speed is powered by emotion, which creates an aura of lightning around him. He is, however, shown in the bar fight in Sonic 1 to be lacking in fighting prowess, as he can't land a decent punch, and is much better using his speed to slow down his perception of time, allowing him to pull one over on his adversaries Quicksilver style. Sonic's glowy emotion-driven powers are yet to be truly explained. However, the Echidnas and Dr. Robotnik have both seek to gain this ability, with it seeming to connect to Chaos Power, as Robotnik also gained lightning glowy powers when using the Master Emerald. There's a bit of a contradiction when it comes to Movie Sonic's fighting abilities, as his bullet time skills are only ever used when the film would rather not solve things with a dance battle. Also, Sonic is able to land some punches on Knuckles. Is Knuckles just weaker than humans? If so, how come he still poses a physical threat to Dr. Robotnik? Game Sonic definitely seems to have a bit more of a consistent power set, which does borderline on Gary Stewism in places, especially fake Emerald Chaos Control. But I'd also say that I much prefer his power being represented by the wind than electricity, as electricity is awfully commonplace with speedster characters. I get why, I just think wind is a bit more imaginative and it just looks cleaner. I do, however, like that Movie Sonic's powers are triggered by emotions. I guess we'll be needing a little more elaboration on Movie Sonic's powers, so for now, I'm gonna go with Game Sonic. So the next category is relationships, and before you get your hopes up, no, I'm not going into shipping or anything like that. When I say relationships, I just mean how he relates to others. So, Game Sonic in some ways gives us a little more to work with thanks to the fact that there are more game characters, so to speak. Sonic is pretty independent in the games, often single-handedly keeping the world safe, as we have seen that when Sonic is removed from the equation, well, oh, the furry humanity. While Game Sonic might be empowered by his friends, he doesn't really rely on anyone. And it's often on him to protect his friends, like Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. Tails is like a little brother to Sonic, often offering up strategies and intel in service of Sonic's adventures. Knuckles began as Sonic's enemy when he was duped by Dr. Robotnik that Sonic wanted to steal the Chaos Emeralds for nefarious use, before realizing that he had been manipulated and teaming up with Sonic to save the day and bring down the Death Egg. Since then, a cheeky friendly rivalry was born, borderlining on outright sexual tension, which poor Amy Rose gets none of, as Sonic often rejects her romantic gestures and advances. Amy loves Sonic, and it's entirely for who he is. She seeks to change nothing about him, even when it's inconvenient to her and her love for him. As for Sonic's reasoning, it's been a bit more established recently that this is due to his lifestyle and not wanting to be tied down. In spite of that, he still feels a great deal of affection for Amy. Their dynamic has matured from her chasing him around to her realizing that the love she feels for him will always be a part of her, but she still has to live her own life. It's actually pretty profound. And then there's Dr. Robotnik. Sonic considers Robotnik more of a frenemy than anything else. When discovering that Eggman is up to no good, Sonic usually gets a sense of excitement and anticipation for the adventure ahead, once again confident in his ability to take down the evil Doctor, who is also shown to have a bit more of a sentimental side to him than his movie counterpart played by Jim Carrey. There are times when Sonic will willingly work with Dr. Robotnik if he has to, even if some banter is thrown back and forth. A testament to, once again, Sonic's willingness to make peace with his enemies. Moving over to Movie Sonic, Sonic serves as a surrogate son to Tom and Maddie Wachowski, acknowledging Tom as his dad at the end of the second Sonic movie. The Wachowski family have a really healthy dynamic as they can work productively together without emotions getting in the way, which I really appreciate. The three would willingly die together if it meant that they get to go down as a family. Moving over to Tails, Sonic is drawn to him for the fact that Tails was rejected for being weird due to his two tails. Sonic is able to relate to that in a brotherly fashion, and someone who views him for the hero that he wants to be. In Sonic 2, Sonic and Tails prove to go together like chili on a hot dog. As for Knuckles, so like in the games, Sonic and Knuckles start as enemies. However, this time Sonic also has some emotional stake in their rivalry, as Knuckles hails from the tribe that took his original surrogate mother Longclaw from him. These two are the children of warring factions who finally end the cycle of war and violence and become family to one another. Unlike Game Sonic, Movie Sonic takes Dr. Robotnik seriously as a proactive threat. There's no excitement from him when Robotnik returns from the Mushroom Planet, only dread and anger. It's hard to say if Movie Sonic and Robotnik will ever team up, as while Movie Robotnik has never quite reached the extents that his game counterpart has, he's proven to be more irredeemably evil and less human than his game counterpart. Still comedic, but far less sympathetic and in no way emotional. Completely insincere in every way and proud of it. When it comes to Game Sonic, his interactions don't run quite as deep and familial as they do in the films. Movie Sonic is far more openly dependent on his friends and family. In the first film, his loneliness is his greatest weakness. He's always actively seeking out interaction and friendship with those around him. Because of this, Movie Sonic plays a much more proactive role in his relationships, less a static character that others hinge off of. For that reason, the point goes to Movie Sonic. The next category is music, and I am starting to question if I just added this category simply because I felt Game Sonic deserved another W. But for real, like, music does still play a small role in how we as an audience perceive these characters. Music is important in any kind of media that has an audio component. Now, Game Sonic is typically accompanied by high energy music, whether it's New Jack Swing, rock music, funk, EDM, or heavy metal. Game Sonic brings high energy tunes to a variety of different genres. Personally, I think he's most synonymous with rock and New Jack Swing, but there's a lot of different genres that Sonic really lends well with. Now, it needs to be acknowledged that music in a video game serves a different purpose to music in a film. So naturally, the music in the Sonic movies is a little less present than it is in the games, less intrinsically melodic, but okay, there's a bit to talk about. You might hear the occasional pop song, the occasional 90s hit, and the end credits are generally accompanied by some form of synth pop. But the scores of these films that accompany these characters, it's just painfully inoffensive and low energy. Junkie XL, Tom Honkenberg, he's a superb composer. And I would think he'd be a really good fit for Sonic, as he's no stranger to high energy, hard hitting music, such as his score for Zack Snyder's Justice League, which even uses a variety of different instruments, beyond just the basic orchestra. But it's clear to me that, like, the Sonic movies are just a paycheck to him, as you'd probably be able to find a more distinctive theme for Sonic in the Kevin MacLeod royalty-free library. It's all just basic orchestra. There's minimal use of any of the genres that define this character here. And Sonic's theme music in these films just has nothing to say or evoke about the character. It says something when perhaps the most memorable piece of music from the Sonic movies came from Ant-Man and the Wasp. I mean, okay, probably the most notable piece of music from these films, in my opinion, is Stars in the Sky by Kid Cudi. No disrespect to Speed Me Up, but it's not as much my bag, and Stars in the Sky definitely evokes more of a Sonic-y kind of feel to it. And it's gotta be said, Stars in the Sky is a really great track, especially the extended version, which features a little bit by Lil Nas X. There is a clear winner here though. It's Game Sonic. Absolutely no competition whatsoever. Whether it is Jun Sonoe or Tomio Otani, whether it's Crush 40, Cash Cash, or Kellen Quinn, Game Sonic is always accompanied by brilliant music. So, overall, there is a pretty clear winner here, going by my own standards. Movie Sonic is, to me, the more well-thought-out character. That is in many ways thanks to Game Sonic, though. We mustn't lose sight of the fact that Game Sonic wrote the playbook that would give Movie Sonic around 30 years worth of material to work with, adapt, and improve, which brought us a much more refined version of the character. That's not to take Movie Sonic for granted, though. When making changes to classic characters, it can bring reduction. What makes Movie Sonic work so well to me is I don't feel like anything's missing here. I feel like they've taken the Sonic character and expanded on it, making him play a more proactive role in his stories and his world. With all that being said, while the Sonic movies have leaned more into Sonic, as a kid, I appreciate that Sonic Frontiers, the first post-movie Sonic game, leaned more into the maturity of Game Sonic. Rather than folding and drawing all inspiration from the successful movie franchise, they instead made steps to refine what Game Sonic does so well, and did something that went against the grain of the films. So while I do think that there are a lot of cool character decisions made with the movie Sonic that Game Sonic could afford to learn from, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want them to go exactly in that same direction. And as I say, this method of comparison isn't exactly fair or objective, as Movie Sonic had Game Sonic to pull inspiration from. Game Sonic has had far more time to make mistakes. I do not want to focus on Video Game Sonic losing this game. I'd much rather give credit to and celebrate how well the movie Sonic has managed to elevate the source material. Maybe Movie Sonic will falter later down the line, but hopefully he'll keep up this hot streak of demonstrating a great understanding of the character, all while adding new layers to flesh him out further. And you know what? I would be game if, upon reaching the end of his kind of maturity arc, if this movie Sonic would venture out to other worlds, allowing us to have fully animated Sonic movies, still with that same tangible art style. However, I don't want to take for granted the movies that we have already. Sonic 1 and 2 are really strong video game movies, and family films that I could easily recommend to just any families and Sonic fans alike. I think the point I wanted to make with this video, though, is that staying completely faithful to the games doesn't work for everything. While it does work for Mario, because Mario's always been about that Mushroom Kingdom world that Mario lives in, and the Mario characters themselves are much less of a focus, I think it's interesting that there's now a demand for Sonic to be more like the video games that people constantly complain about, and were saying should have been more like the movies. Maybe there's a middle ground, but my point is, credit where it is due. The Mario movie looks really strong. I don't think it necessarily needs to be compared to these Sonic movies. There are areas in which these Sonic movies do benefit from being live-action hybrid movies with a very tangible quality to them. And just the fact that we actually got a live-action, real-life Labyrinth Zone movie set, yeah, that's enough to make this whole live-action thing entirely worthwhile. That is awesome. So what do you guys think? Are there maybe some different categories that you would explore doing this kind of exercise? Do you have very different standards from my own? Do you disagree? Do you agree? Whatever your opinions are, put them down in the comments below. I can't wait to read them. And until the next time, thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a great day. I say, you've made it to the end of the video! Congrats! No, but seriously, thanks a bunch for watching. And just now, I'll be extending a special thanks to the patrons in the $10 tier, who are Adam Myers, Ken K, Legendary Ray Ray, Mr. SP, Sergio, That Jordo, and Where's Arnold? What an amazing and generous bunch of people. Thank you guys so much for your support. And if you want to join the ranks of these amazing people right here, the link to my Patreon is in the description below. Guys, these are not the easiest times in the world financially, so every little bit you folks are donating is doing wonders. I really would love to be able to do YouTube as a proper fully fledged career someday. It might just be a pipe dream, but maybe you guys can prove some people wrong. But of course, if donations aren't your anything, then, well, it means plenty to me that you just hit that cute little subscribe button over there. I didn't mean hit that way. Well, that's me done for today. Thanks a whole bunch for your support, and have a fantastic day. I'm gonna see you so soon.
Look.